All right, let's talk about a real crypto underdog. What if a project, one that was mocked for years for being too slow, was actually playing the long game to change crypto history? Well, that's the story of Cardano, and we're going to dive right in. So this really is the core question, isn't it? In an industry that is just obsessed with hype and speed, Cardano decided to go a completely different way. It's the classic tortoise in a race full of hares. But the big question we're asking is that slow and steady approach finally about to win the race? I mean, look at the difference here. On one side, you've got the typical crypto playbook, right? Move fast, break things, build a ton of hype, and then, well, you figure out the problems later. Cardano's approach? It's the exact opposite. Everything they do is built on a foundation of formal, peer-reviewed research. It's not about short-term speculation, it's all about building for long-term, real-world adoption. Okay, so this whole unconventional philosophy, it didn't just appear out of thin air. It was actually born from a major disagreement right at the heart of crypto's biggest project. And it all starts with one of its original founders. And that founder is none other than Charles Hoskinson. And yeah, you heard that right. He was one of the original co-founders of Ethereum. He ended up leaving back in 2015 because of some pretty big disagreements about where the project should go. While others wanted to just move super fast and grab the market, Hoskinson was convinced that a more rigorous, more academic approach was the only way to build something that would last. And his vision, it was never just about finance. Hoskinson saw blockchain as this foundational technology that could serve entire societies. We're talking about powering things like digital identity, education systems, and even government services. For him, it was supposed to be a tool for real, sustainable development, not just a playground for speculators. So if you're gonna build something that ambitious, you can't just wing it. You need a totally different kind of architecture, one that's built with the precision of an engineer, not just the creative flair of an artist. At the very heart of Cardano is something called Ouroboros. Now, unlike a lot of other protocols that were kind of built on hype and a prayer, Ouroboros was the first consensus protocol to be developed through intense academic research. Get this, it was mathematically proven to be secure before they even wrote a single line of code for it. That's a huge deal. So, why does any of this matter? Well, for starters, it's incredibly energy efficient. It totally avoids that massive power consumption you see with Bitcoin. Second, that provable security, it gives developers the confidence to build really serious applications on top of it. And third, the way it randomly selects who creates the next block, that helps prevent centralization and keeps the network truly in the hands of the many, not the few. The design of the network itself is also pretty clever. Cardano actually uses two separate layers. So think of the settlement layer as like a super secure bank vault. All it does is manage transactions and your ADA balance. It's locked down tight. Then you have the computation layer, and that's where all the smart contracts and applications run. By keeping them separate, you can update and experiment with apps on the computation layer without ever risking the security of the funds on the settlement layer. It's this brilliant mix of security and flexibility. But, this slow, methodical approach, it came with a big consequence. For years, while other chains were just exploding with activity and hype, Cardano was, well, it was quiet. It got a ton of criticism, got overlooked, but here's the thing. That quiet period was all part of the master plan. See, Cardano's development was laid out from the very beginning in 5 distinct eras. Each one had a super clear goal. Instead of just throwing everything out there at once, the whole focus was on building each part of the foundation perfectly, one step at a time. From just launching the network to decentralization, all the way to full community governance. It was the definition of a marathon, not a sprint. And yet, during that time, a lot of people just dismissed it. They called it the silent chain or even a ghost chain because there wasn't a flashy ecosystem of apps to play with yet. But what all those critics were missing was what was happening behind the scenes. The team was busy laying the essential groundwork, building the highways, the plumbing, the entire power grid, before they ever thought about opening the city gates to the public. And then, the city gates finally swung open. All of that quiet, painstaking foundational work started to pay off, big time. The whole narrative began to shift from just theory to actual practice as developers and real-world projects started to show up. The real turning point, the moment everything changed, was in 2021 during the Gogon era. This was the moment smart contracts were finally switched on. It was like this incredible engine, which had been carefully built for years, was finally turned on. The vehicle was officially ready to join the race. So why are developers flocking to Cardano now? Well, it's a few key things. You've got that super high security, which is perfect for financial apps. You have low and, importantly, predictable transaction costs. And you've got this really strong sense of community ownership, thanks to unique governance programs like Project Catalyst. And we're not just talking about more crypto-native apps here. A huge part of Cardano's global strategy is focused on real-world utility, especially in Africa. They're actually working with governments on massive projects for digital identity, for tracking educational achievements, and even for improving agricultural supply chains. This is about building real infrastructure for people, not just launching another DeFi protocol. Okay, so the foundation is laid, the ecosystem is definitely waking up and growing fast. So what's next? Cardano is now looking toward its next big evolution, and this involves some potentially game-changing upgrades, but also some very real risks on the horizon. The next big leap forward is a major upgrade called Hydra. Now, this is a Layer 2 scaling solution, and it's designed to tackle the one major criticism that has followed Cardano from the beginning, its speed. The whole point of Hydra is to dramatically, and I mean dramatically, increase how many transactions the network can handle. And look, the scale of this jump, it's honestly hard to wrap your head around. If Hydra is successful, it could take Cardano from its current, respectable speed to a network that can handle over 1 million transactions per second. That's not a typo. That kind of performance would put it in a league of its own, combining that rock-solid security with absolutely massive throughput. And it's this combination, that stability, the clear roadmap, and this insane scaling potential, that's really starting to turn heads. We're seeing serious institutional interest begin to grow. The bigger, more cautious investors who care more about stability and long-term vision, they are definitely starting to take notice. But let's be real here. It's not a guaranteed win. The crypto market is just fiercely competitive, right? You've got giants like Ethereum that are constantly evolving. Plus, you've got to consider things like the global economy, the technical hurdles of actually rolling out an upgrade like Hydra, and just the challenge of keeping a massive community engaged. These are all very real risks on the road ahead, which brings us right back to where we started. In a world that almost always rewards speed and hype above all else, was Cardano's slow, patient, research-first strategy a huge mistake? Or is it a history-making masterstroke that's about to completely change the game? I guess only time will tell.